So we are back now, right on the panel discussion. That's about tech investing versus impact investing, opportunities and challenges. We have Samira Salman. She is going to moderate the session. She represents Heathside Ventures as COO. She is a leading business advisor, domain expert, provide direct investments. And we have Vishal Harishchandra. He is the chairman, CEO, Valkin Limited, family office, London, UK. He is a seasoned entrepreneur, owner of the Valkin Group, founder of Elite Models in London. Oh, he's a fashionette. Okay, great. The Valkin Group is a family office trading company that has global interest in media, fashion, real estate, private equity, philanthropy, films trading. They finance, invest in growing businesses in developed markets. Then I have Ruchi Dana. She is a partner, Dana Group, Dubai. Ruchi has worked with Golden Seeds, a women-focused angel network in New York, New Silk Route Growth Capital, a PE firm in Dubai. She has mainly focused on healthcare-related investment in both these firms. She is a serial entrepreneur and has co-founded 3 businesses. Jugaad, an on-demand taste last-mile logistics provider in UAE. Pick a Venture, crowdfunding accelerator platform for Southeast Asia. And we have Marvin Leo. I think he'll be joining later. He's yet to come. And we have Debbie. She'll be joining again. Okay, go ahead, Samira.
Okay, thank you, Rajan. And good afternoon to everybody on the audience, or morning or evening, depending on where you are. And welcome, Ruchi and Vishal. We'll allow our other guests to join when they come. So I want to start with first a general question to level set. If you'll both please give us a little bit more detail about your groups and what you're involved in, and then how are you looking at different opportunities in tech investing and impact investing, especially after the global pandemic. So, and the more background you can give us on your firms will help us understand your perspective on these items. So, Ruchi, I'd love to start with you.
Sure. So I'm Dr. Ruchi Dana. I'm a medical doctor, and I also did my MBA from Stanford. I was born and raised in the Middle East. So I was born in Libya in North Africa, and then our family moved to Dubai when the Libyan sanctions happened. So currently we have a family office based in Dubai through which we make investments, and we are a family of doctors. So we mainly make investments in the healthcare field, and these are direct investments. Apart from that, we are also LPs in some of the micro VCs that are emerging. And most of our investments are outside the Middle East because our operational business is still here in the Middle East and Africa. And in terms of the stage of the investments, it's usually early stage seed to Series A, sometimes Series B. But we've also done some opportunistic deals. We have done some pre-IPO deals, and those don't really have to be in the healthcare sector. And even in terms of being an LP in the micro VCs, those are VCs in other sectors, because healthcare is something that we think that as a family of doctors, we understand it. We do have a hospital in India, and that sort of helps us in the due diligence aspect as well. But there are so many other sectors that we really are not the experts on, and that's the reason we became LPs in these VCs, so that we can do some co-investment with them and maybe double down on the winners. I'm really excited to be here, and impact investments, tech investments, that's one of my forte, because as a doctor, as a medical practitioner, I think there are a number of healthcare tech investments that fall in with the impact angle as well, and those are the ones that we're actively looking for. Thank you.
Thank you. A fun fact is that we all grew up in UAE.
Really?
Yes. Vishal and I we just determined that. So when I was born, my parents lived in Dubai. When Sheikh Zayed made the country, he hired the company my father worked with to build the roads. So my parents lived in UAE, but then I was born in US. Then we went back, and Vishal as well. So we all have lovely connections to the region. So Vishal, a little bit about your family and the kind of investments you make.
Yeah. So we're a single family office based out of London most of the time. And we typically invest in consumer products, so clothing, fashion, apparel, medical devices, IoT devices, anything physical hardware. That's our forte. So we're not smart enough to do equity. We're mostly debt guys. So we do working capital. So either it's import finance, trade finance, supply chain, venture debt. That's our forte. It's typically supporting entrepreneurs and founders with a bottleneck in terms of working capital. So we look at companies across the world, the US, UK, Europe, mostly developed markets. Again, we don't do developing. We're not brave enough to do that, but we'll do developed to a certain extent. We typically between 1 and 50 million revenue size companies. So we don't do startups. We don't do seed. Check size 100,000 going up to 5 million. And we look for exceptional founders. That's the key.
Yeah. Thank you for that. So Ruchi, can you give us some examples of how you look for impact specifically in the healthcare space, and what types of, if you want to use examples of things that you've looked at or things you've invested in, so we can understand what does impact mean to you and what are you looking for?
Yeah, sure. And so currently, if you look at COVID and the post-COVID world, currently a lot of people are looking at healthcare startups, and the valuations are really growing up at the moment. But we have been long-term healthcare investors. So the kind of investments that we made were not necessarily in the COVID times, maybe before that, but they definitely had the impact angle. So one of them was an elderly care platform, because there's a huge need for the elderly population, and that's a population that's actually very much willing to pay for the needs as well, but it's just it's been a neglected platform. And there are a number of startups working on this field. There are some number of IoT device startups, remote patient monitoring startups, and a lot of startups have popped up during the COVID time, especially because of social distancing and telehealth and all, and patients need to be taken care of at homes and in nursing homes. But the kind of investments that we had made in this sector were before COVID, and we're actively looking at some investments right now in the elderly space again, but the kind of valuations that we are seeing right now are so high that it doesn't make sense. And apart from elderly care, we have also made some investments in the longevity space. So looking at genetic testing, microbiome testing, and how it can actually help in terms of prevention of chronic diseases. Because chronic diseases, again, is a huge burden to the healthcare systems worldwide. And finding out a way to actually prevent those diseases at an earlier time could actually lessen the burden quite much. So we have made some investments in that. Apart from that, we have also invested into a robotic surgery startup that's actually a low-cost robotic surgery startup whose vision is actually to democratize healthcare across regions. So the quality of care that would be available in the developed countries would be the same that would be available for the developing countries as well. So these are some of the investments that we have made, and almost all of them have the impact angle. But we have also made investments without any particular impact angle. But generally, most of the healthcare investments that we made do have an impact angle to it. Yeah.
Okay. And are most of the where geographically are these investments, and how do you tell us a little bit about your sourcing process and where does the deal flow come from?
Yeah. So most of our investments are actually in the US. We don't have many investments in the Middle East because, again, in terms of diversification, it makes sense to invest outside the region because our family business is so much consolidated within the region. We do have a couple of investments in South Asia as well. And in terms of deal flow, it's mainly through my own network at Stanford and all. And at Stanford, there's a Stanford biodesign course through which a lot of medical device companies come across. So we do actively look at the portfolio startups that are coming out of that course. Apart from that, demo days, in incubators, accelerators, that's a good source in terms of deal flow. Then we're also part of a number of family office networks in which the number of deals that are shared, and there are some family offices through which with which we actually make deals happen, because we are much more comfortable if we have somebody trusted who's already investing into the company. So that's mainly our sources of deal, because if we just happen to wait for startups to reach out to us, that would never happen for a family office. You actually need to look out for the startups that are actually actively raising capital and who are very much in demand. That's how you'll get the best deal flow. And one of the things is that we don't like to piggyback on anybody else's due diligence. So we'd be happy to see the due diligence, the data room and all, but we definitely do our own due diligence. And that's why we focus on direct investments only in the healthcare sector, because that's something that we think that we understand quite well. In terms of deal flow, there are also a number of associates that help us out with deals from time to time. There are a number of VCs that actually help some of the deals from time to time as well, but on and off. But if you talk about like the majority of deals, it's mainly through the family office networks that we're part of, and there's some sort of trust that has already been built, and that's how we end up with investments.
Okay, thank you. So Vishal, in the past year or two, I mean, with COVID and the consumer goods business, how are you looking at businesses differently? Like, are you seeing different sectors in the consumer goods industry that are really looking more viable than others? Like, how have you pivoted what you're looking at?
Well, we haven't really made any changes to our investment strategy. We still look at the same businesses. I mean, people still have to wear clothes, and they still have to go out and buy stuff. People buy more stuff for the home, so we find a lot of consumer brands that are, like, say, home furnishings or in the kitchen. People are staying home, they're cooking more, so consumer spending is going up in that area. And yeah, so I mean, we haven't really changed our strategy much at all. We still look for the same fundamentals of business. We do like investments where there is some sort of impact angle. So if it's sustainable, whether it's gender diversity, women-led businesses, we like supporting women entrepreneurs. I've never lost money on a female-led business so far. Touch wood. I've invested in everything from a grandmother in Florida selling bed linen and pillow covers to a bunch of young girls drop shipping shoes out of Hong Kong into the US. And these girls were doing 12 million euros. So, I mean, we typically look at any angle. The fundamentals of the business have to be good. After that, if there's an angle, there's a positive message in terms of diversity, in terms of impact on the environment. We looked at a company that was making jackets out of plastics made from the ocean. So literally, they would go out and buy excess plastic, make the jackets, and they're doing 15 million euros. They're based out of Amsterdam. So yeah, we look across the board, and I like Ruchi's angle about working with other family offices. We do that quite a bit as well. We do a lot of co-investments, and we see a lot of good deal flow.
I just bought some socks at a farmer's market that were made completely from water bottles. And they were just selling, the softest, most comfortable socks I have put on my feet. They were incredible. So they were a little bit pricey for socks, but I wanted to try and support the entrepreneur. So where do you get most of your deal flow from? Is it similar to Ruchi that you're in a bunch of networks, or do companies come to you?
Well, we have some strategic partnerships that we like to follow up on. So we're working with the British Chamber of Commerce, with the American Chamber of Commerce. So they have SMEs across the world. We don't think of it in terms of startups. We look at any business. If it's been in existence for 10 years and they're just looking for growth capital, that's what we do. In fact, we don't invest in companies that are under 2 years old because they don't have a track record. They don't have a history. We don't have a lot of the metrics. But yeah, family offices, a couple of strategic partnerships. We're looking to do something with the British Fashion Council. We're looking at doing something with any organization that has access to a lot of SMEs that are looking for support, and to let them know that there is support available in the right format. But yeah, family office networks, we do that as well. And investment bankers, actually, a lot of investment bankers. We actually pay for any capital that we deploy, and we're happy to do that. So as long as we get the right deals.
Yeah, So tell us a little bit about the process in your internal team. Do you have a large team? Do you outsource most of it to service providers? What is it? What does the diligence process look like for you?
Well, you're talking to the investment committee, so it doesn't take me long to figure out. No, we do a credit check and we do due diligence on the numbers, but I look at the entrepreneurs, I look at the founders, I walk through the basic. It takes me about half an hour to figure out whether this is a deal for us or we want to pursue it further. I look at the unit economics, I look at the cash flow, I look at the supply chain cycle, I look at what they've been doing. If it's digital, then I look at the customer acquisition cost, the average order, I walk through the basics. I'm not smart enough to do complicated math, but I know that if I buy for $1, I sell for $2, I made $1. So if the entrepreneurs can speak that language, I'm okay with that. So we don't have a huge team doing due diligence. We have a checklist of parameters, and then if it fits, then we do a half an hour call with the founders.
Yeah. That's why your process works. Some of the most successful investors use a very simple process, and they say if it doesn't make simple math, including Warren Buffett, then he doesn't invest in it. I think it's good that you keep it very simple. So Ruchi, you said that you guys do all your own diligence. You do look at the data rooms, but you do your own diligence. So what does your process look like? Do you use internal teams, combination of internal, external? What is that like?
Yeah, so our own team is actually not very big. We have a very lean team, but we do have a network of doctors that actually help us out. And then the hospital and the nursing college in India definitely helps out as well, because most of our investments are actually medical devices that we can actually touch and feel, maybe have pilots at our hospital and see how that would work out. It's, I think, mainly about getting feedback from doctors who would be the end customers of these devices and these technologies. I think that actually helps us quite a lot. In terms of founders, I think it's really necessary to build a trust and to understand the founders, and if they're co-founders, how long have they been together, those sort of things. And we also have an evaluation matrix in which we look for certain basic things, and we also look for spikes. So those spikes have to be customer focus or that ability to hustle. I think these are things that are really important. Would the startup be able to raise funds at the next round? So just to make sure that we are not the only ones that are blocking our money right now, because especially in COVID times, we saw a number of startups that we had funded, but they were really trying to raise funds, but suddenly, because of COVID and after a couple of months, there was so much focus on healthcare, and it all turned out really well. But I think that was one of the times that we realized that it's really important to have founders who can actually market themselves really well and be able to raise the next round, because that's really key. Because in medical device, in healthcare, it takes a lot of time to actually get to the product launch and all. These are all pre-revenue companies with maybe a strong IP. So we definitely look for IP, and that's one of the reasons that these companies are acquired by bigger companies later on. So IP is one of the big factors that we definitely look for.
Yeah, I don't know if you heard, I gave a little talk earlier, but I spoke mainly about the founders and the ability to hustle. I mean, I think that's the number one criteria. You can give all the money in the world to somebody, if they don't hustle, at some point they're going to run out of the money.
Actually, if you have a minute, I'll tell you a true story. Okay, so you guys are from Dubai, right? Okay, so, and this is a true story. You can Google this. You've got the Dubai Shopping Festival, right?
Yeah.
You guys have seen the festival in January, February. They have it once a year, and then they have the Summer Surprises. So this is back in the day when I was young and hungry. I was 21, 22, out of university, broke. You'd go to a gas station. You'd buy the prepaid credit. You spend 25 dirhams and you can win a car, right, every day during the shopping festival. So at that time, I had a job at an ad agency. I didn't have money to start a business. So I went to the gas station. I bought the card for 25 dirhams. I got the coupon, raffle ticket, right? I sold the coupon. I got my money back. I had the ticket with me, the raffle coupon. So I said, this is a great business. I should just do this. Every day after work, I would go buy thousands of hours of credit, go door to door to the retailers, sell it, get my money back. I think it cost me 50 fills for each ticket. That was my cost, right? And I started putting in 10, 20, 50 raffle coupons every day. On the 27th day, I won the car. I actually won the Nissan Patrol. I sold it for 150,000 dirhams. It's about $40,000. I quit my job the next day. I took a studio, started my business. And that studio, I used to live there and work there at the same time. So literally, don't have money for gas. What am I going to do with the car? So, and that was the first business I ever started.
Yeah. I think that's a wonderful story, and thank you for sharing it. There was an article, I can't remember the publication, but it said that almost 50% of Fortune 500 companies were started by immigrants. Something like that. I can't remember that. Something about immigrants and I think there's something about that hunger inside of you that makes you figure out a way to make it work no matter what. So really appreciate that. So in your business though, the consumer, it's mainly consumer, right? Did you have to do a bunch of pivots or allow people a little bit more time and space last year for payments and that kind of thing? Because I'm assuming some of the businesses weren't meeting their revenue targets. That accurate?
Yeah, I would say so. Online spending went up. So, some of our businesses, they sell the omni-channel. They sell online, B2B, to retailers, distributors, wholesalers. So, yeah, some of them, they do slow down. But at the end of the day, you get a feel for what your customer wants and is looking for. So we invested in a plastics company. So they buy the raw material from Saudi Arabia, and then they ship it down, manufacture the plastic cups, the spoons. So some part of the business went down, but the garbage bags went up because people, the cleaning, there's more hygiene, cleaning. So it balances out, and most of the businesses have done okay, actually. And then they're growing. So
were there any businesses that either had a very surprising increase or a surprising decrease?
Luxury. I think jewelry saw a bit of a dip. Nobody's going out anymore, so you're not buying diamond earrings. But I would say e-commerce stuff like costume jewelry went up. Home-based products, especially in the kitchen, we really saw that. And people selling sweatpants and T-shirts, really working from home, right? So smart casual, again.
Yeah.
Really saw an increase.
What's the approximate number of holdings? Like how many different businesses are you involved in at one time?
Well, last year we did about 7 investments. And we look to do a similar number. We would do more if we could find them. Just that, I'm a greedy savage capitalist, and it's not easy for me to find deals on the terms that we like at the valuations that we like. So, yeah. But yeah, we would love to find more businesses. Just it's hard.
I actually have after you said your criteria, I wrote down, I have something I'm going to send you that might fit your criteria. So
yeah, absolutely.
This
sure.
could be
I'm going to send Ruchi all my medical device deals because I don't understand it. I don't get anything.
Yeah. So Ruchi, I would love for you to share with us from your perspective, especially as a doctor. We know that there's a lot more investment in healthcare now and telemedicine, et cetera, et cetera. What do you think are the 3 or 4 areas that got most accelerated because of the global pandemic? And what should we be looking at as investors, or for the entrepreneurs in the meeting? What should they be thinking about building? What areas are you seeing a real spike?
Yeah. So remote patient monitoring has been like a huge area, because like the doctors, they want the data from the patients, but there's social distancing, and also the number of IoT devices that actually helped out in that front. So that's one area that's gained a lot of traction. And suddenly, because of telehealth, telehealth is right now dipping a bit, but because of telehealth, there was a huge need for cybersecurity businesses. So in fact, like there was one incident that happened in the US where like with a very well-known hospital that they got a phishing attack, and there was ransomware that was asked for from the hospital, and they actually paid the ransomware to get the data back. So like healthcare cybersecurity is something that's really important, because everybody is using telehealth, doctors are working remotely, and like there's a lot of education that has to happen in these especially in the healthcare sector, when like people are not so much they don't really understand how to avoid like spam mails and all of that. So I think healthcare cybersecurity is an area that not a number of startups, but like especially the healthcare and the IT people are looking at. And apart from that, I think like preventive medicine has gained a lot of traction, because everybody is suddenly so much more aware of their health. And in fact, I was on an all doctors panel, and the doctors were joking that suddenly, like whenever you give a medication to a patient, the patients are so much more adherent to the medications that you give these days, because everybody's so scared of the comorbidities of like obesity and diabetes and all of that. So everybody's taking care of themselves. I think that has changed a lot of things. So like preventive healthcare has grown up quite a lot. And like if you talk about genetic or microbiome testing or nutraceuticals, I think these are the businesses that would definitely gain traction. So longevity is a theme that would be around for some time.
Okay, very interesting. So is there anything that you want to share with us as far as like the technology versus impact component? Like what are the 5 or 6? I mean, obviously both of you have your diligence checklist and your criteria, but if you could help us, like what's the stuff that's off paper, like not written down on your checklist, but either through your experience, your gut tells you this, or what are the 5, I mean, I'm not going to give you an exact number, but things that are not on a traditional checklist, but in your experience, it's what you look for in an investment.
Sure. So for us, like especially in terms of like the fund investments that we do, we actively look at them from the ESG angle. Now we don't look at all the metrics. We're not such a big LP that we can actually have a lot of control, but we definitely look for like at least a good representation in the fund of like a number of funds that I've spoken to, I've met, like there's hardly any diversity in those funds. So that's a big no-no for us. Apart from that, like having more women on board is something that we are really passionate about. So in terms of startups or funds, it's really important to have that characteristic. And one of the things that we look for is like how satisfied are the employees of that company or of the fund. So similar to like a net promoter score of a customer, we look for like the employee net promoter score. So like would the employees be willing to recommend other people to join the company? I think that says quite a lot about the company's culture and how much resources the company is willing to pay to actually retain the employees, because employee attrition is a big cost for companies, and then that actually affects like the entire unit economics of a company. So I think like these are the 3 main sectors that we actively look at, like mainly like having more women on boards, having a proper representation of women and minority on the fund managers, and apart from that, like looking at the employee net promoter score.
How do you determine that score? Is it something that you ask when you're diligencing to send a survey, or what? Tell us how to do that. That's interesting.
Yeah, so that's a common question that we get. In fact, like if you talk about ESG metrics and all, there's no proper reporting, and there's a lot of confusion about who should bear the cost of these reporting of these metrics. Should it be the portfolio companies or the fund itself? So we actually rely on the fund's metrics, because the portfolio companies themselves would never have the resources to kind of come up with these numbers. But we just send out like the kind of survey that we have designed. We send it out to the fund, and then they check with the portfolio companies about those questions.
Okay. All right. How do you ensure that the fund is not embellishing the result of their portfolio company?
Yeah, so it's, I think one of the main things is to look at the attrition numbers, like how many people left the company in the turnaround of employees. That speaks a lot. And that's something that we look for. And if we are doing proper due diligence on a startup, we definitely talk to the team members apart from the founders to really understand the culture of the startup. I think that speaks a lot, because eventually after fundraising, these startups have to grow quite a lot, and if you don't have the culture set nicely at the very beginning, it becomes a real challenge to actually scale when you're getting big, and hiring becomes a big problem.
Yeah, I think that's one of the bigger challenges with the pandemic, is that I feel that when you're diligencing, there's a real value in being on site for the company location, and not just sitting in the conference room and meeting the founders and everybody has a nice presentation, but really like going into, wandering around the company and speaking to some of the maybe not so senior members of the team gives you a really good perspective, because not everybody can keep a poker face, So, and now you're just doing this diligencing on the Zoom, and it's like everybody can look good and happy for 1 hour.
I know, exactly.
When you spend a whole day in a company or a day or two, usually at the end of the second day, the truth starts coming out, right?
Exactly.
So it's interesting. What about you, Vishal? What do you look for that's maybe not on the paper, but in your experience? I bet you're going to say the hustle, right? The hustle.
Okay, well, yeah, the PhD, the poor, hungry, driven. So, but I look for humility. I really like guys that are humble. I mean, I was, watching Shark Tank, and Kevin O'Leary, he said something really interesting. He's like, you start a business. If it's your business, you own 100%. The minute you get your first customer, you're now number 2. The customer comes first. The minute you get your first employee, congratulations, you're now number 3. The minute you get your first investor, now you're number 4. So in the pecking order, the customer is always first, because no business ever survives without a customer. And for me, I look at the numbers in terms of not employee attrition so much. Steve Jobs, everybody hated him, but the customers love him. They buy the product. So I look at the numbers into returning customers, as in how are they doing? Are they having to struggle to get new customers all the time, or are the old customers coming back? And that's a big one, because if they're growing sales, I never read a deck. I've never seen a bad projection, right? You see 100 decks, you start to see the picture. The projections always look good. Nobody ever comes and tells me, I promise you, we're going to lose money. It's going to be fun, right? But so I don't read the deck. I look at the historicals. So I tell every entrepreneur, don't send me any projections. I don't want to see a single projection. I want to see your historical numbers. And then I look for scrappiness, of course, bootstrapped. I was looking at investing in a couple in the UK. They do adult toys, like, vibrators and other unmentionables, but great business in pandemic times. And they did one angel round, 260,000. And now they're doing about £3 million a year. And I was speaking to another girl, she has a lingerie business. She's raised $17 million and she's doing $4 million in revenue. So she had access to cheap money, and she got lucky with a family office, but she's just not good at running the business. So scrappy. If they can bootstrap it, imagine that couple. I give them 17 million, they'll kill it for me. So,
Yeah, those are some great examples. I love that you're number 1, 2, 3, 4. I think that's very, very smart way to think about the business. So, what are you foreseeing for family offices in the post-COVID world? Like, do you think we're going to be doing things differently now? Our family's viewpoint always has been that the big world problems will be solved by private capital, family offices, high net worth, sovereign wealth funds. And I think that becomes more so today. And I especially think in the healthcare biotech world, that there's such a funding gap need, and institutions are not set up to be able to do that kind of funding, and neither are governments really. And so it's really up to us to now invest our money. So, and I mean, I know also in the past 5 years, like there's more and more family offices than ever. So What are you seeing do you think that the way that we operate as families will change, our roles will change, what we're looking at?
I mean, I don't know about your family. I mean, when we look at, I think it's possible to make money and do good at the same time. So I think you're right. A lot of the future problems will be solved by private capital because, governments can only do so much when it comes to implementing policy and stuff. Yes, but private money is where really, a simple analogy, I thought about this and I say, you build a hotel and side by side, you build a school. Let's say you spend, I don't know, 30 million building a hotel or 30 million building a school. The operating profits from the hotel pay for the school to run into perpetuity. So now you've got a business that's making money and you've got a nonprofit, which is actually, linked to it. So yeah, theoretically, we like the idea that you can have a business, create a profit, and with that profit, you can do some good. Fundamentally, a business is for profit. So if you don't make money, I see founders all the time and they tell me, we're going to do great things. I was like, you're not going to do anything if you don't stay in business. So if you can't afford employees, you can't make a profit, you won't be around. So again, the Shark Tank, Damon, first make the money, then you can matter.
Yeah, it's funny that you say that. I remember the very first time I spoke at the UN, the first question that was asked when they raised the hand was, it was, an NGO asking, well, what do we do when the money runs out? And, my personal viewpoint is whether you're getting investment capital or donor capital or any type of, it doesn't matter. You need to run your business like a business and you have to make the capital be, sustaining and recurring. And I did not answer the question how I wanted to because I did not want to get banned from ever speaking there. But, it's like that mentality of, I have this amount of money and I need to make it last as long forever as I can and to pivot as quickly as I can. And I think, what's happened with Silicon Valley and the unicorns, in a way, the media has done a disservice to entrepreneurs because now the media tells us, oh, you can just keep getting more and more money. And if it doesn't work, just like shut that down and start something else and raise more money. And that's really not what we should be doing. And I mean, part of the reason that we make direct investments, our family has multiple examples of sustainable technology companies in which we've invested that had they been invested in a venture capital fund model would have been shut down as a failure because they weren't able to get off the ground in the time frame that the capital would need to be returned to a fund. But because we built these companies with private capital, patient capital, family office capital, yes, one company was supposed to need, $5 million and take 2 years, and it needed $10 million, took 8 years. But you know what? It's now a successful company. And I think that we're starting to shift back to, businesses need to be built and grown and nurtured. And if it doesn't work, that doesn't mean you just throw it out. You need to go in there and fix it. So, of course, you can tell I'm very, very passionate about this because I think that if a business has some kind of traction and it starts having problems, well, then go in and fix the problems. You don't just throw it away. Anyway, that's
throw more money at it.
point. I forgot to mention earlier to the audience, we are very happy to take questions while we're speaking. So if anybody wants to type a question, please do so. I think we only have a couple more minutes if I'm doing the timing right. Rajan, I think so, correct? So if there are any questions, we're happy to take them. Anybody has questions? I don't think I see any questions.
There are some questions.
Yeah. Okay. There are. Okay. Maybe I'm not. Oh, sorry. Okay. Now I see them. Sorry. Okay. Let's see. Okay. Okay, so this question is about healthcare is really needed right now. And the question is about how should family offices explore seriously investing in healthcare startups? I think that's a fantastic question, Ruchi, because I know a lot of families, they stay away from healthcare and biotech because they think it's a specialized area of knowledge. they stay away from making direct investments or even fund investments because they don't feel they have the criteria to evaluate it. So if I'm a family and I say, you know what, I know the healthcare sector is growing and it's an important place and I would like to diversify my portfolio, what's your advice to us for how to seriously explore and evaluate investing in the industry? How should we get started?
Sure, I think that's an excellent question. Especially these days, there are a number of investors who were not into the healthcare sector, but they're certainly like trying to get into the healthcare sector. I think there are a number of pitch competitions that are specific for the healthcare sector. That's a good way to start. You can just explore these startups and see like what are the trends, what are the kind of questions that people are asking for. There are a number of angel groups that are specific for healthcare. Not just in the US, but worldwide. So there are specific angel groups in which there are a number of doctors who actually help out in the due diligence. I think that's, again, a good area to start. There are some crowdfunding websites as well in which like there are specific healthcare investments that are put out there, and there are a number of doctors who help out in the due diligence. That's, again, a good area. And apart from that, accelerators, incubators, I think that would be, and many of them are specialized for healthcare. That would be, again, a good way to start. In terms of VC, there are some funds that are specific for the healthcare sector. So again, like maybe becoming an LP in those funds would make sense, so that like the risk would be diversified instead of making direct investments immediately. And apart from that, I think universities are a good resource, like to check what's happening in terms of like the IP and the collaboration with the governments and all. I think universities can guide you in terms of like what's the next big thing that would be about to happen in the industry.
So I probably shouldn't ask this question, but I'm going to. In the industry, doctors and medical professionals are not known for having the most extreme business savvy. So, of course, your family excluded from that, but how should we evaluate that? I think, there's a notion that doctors and scientists get very connected to whatever the solution is, or their technology or whatever it is, and they can't get separate. They get very emotionally involved in whatever it is. And they can't separate from the business part. So can you give us some advice on how to, for myself personally, we evaluated, it was an amazing, brilliant, like breakthrough technology, but the scientists couldn't get out of their own way enough to let us commercialize it for them. And unfortunately, I'm not in the business of burning money in my front yard. So, so how should we navigate that component when we see somebody a little bit too emotionally attached?
That's a very common problem that we see in the healthcare sector. And one of the ways to get across, to navigate that is like most of these startups actually end up hiring CEOs who can actually do the commercial work for them, who can actually do the fundraising and the pitches and like lead the company for a long-term strategy. Because oftentimes the doctors or the PhD scientists who are working on that molecule and that, they're not the best people in terms of like fundraising or thinking about the long-term aspects of the company, or even thinking about the business proposals and all. So that's one way. And apart from that, some of the companies do have co-founders. So like some of the co-founders are from the business background, and those help out quite a lot. But most often I've seen like they actually end up hiring CEOs who can actually like navigate the company through such challenges later on.
Sometimes it's
very similar to fashion designers. They're always about thinking about the product and the style and the design. But I'm like, they're like, oh, we've got this great press. We're doing a fashion show. I was like, I don't care. You're sleeping on your mother's couch. Go sell it.
Yeah,
it's very funny. In the fashion industry, the majority of designers that are super successful, it's because they had a family member, a cousin, an uncle, a brother, somebody very close to them who was very business savvy.
Yeah.
Always. Yeah. So we have a question here from Greg about, do you envisage the direct investment trend for family offices lasting long after the pandemic? So I'll share my viewpoint on this, Greg. I think the answer is yes, and I think the reason why, I have a viewpoint that I did not grow up in the investment world or Wall Street. I was a lawyer, and I was a deal lawyer, and I built and grew companies and brands. I build and grow companies and brands. And I think that at the end of the day, a lot of the fund and investment structures and, hedge funds, venture capital funds, were put into place to serve a specific financial need at the time. And it was a financial structure. And I think that the way that those financial structures have functioned is not still how they were intended in the beginning. So I do think we're going to see a cyclical approach, and people are going to go back to, and at my keynote earlier, I quoted some statistics, but 40 to 60% of families are moving out of funds and more into directs. I do also think there will be a component of backlash, meaning in 5 to 10 years from now, when these direct investments we made perhaps weren't as successful as we liked, and then we realized, wait a minute, there's no fund manager for me to call to help the company. Like, I have to go help the company. I do think there's going to be a shifting. My personal viewpoint is that the skill set of rolling up your sleeves and getting in and working with founders and working with management teams and working with boards is going to be more important than ever for families. So I think that, you're going to see some families have tried to do the direct investments and realize they don't want to be that involved. You'll find other families. And I do think it's a direct reflection of the actual human themselves who's running the family office. And if you're entrepreneurial and you like to get involved and you want to solve things, then you'll do those kind of investments. And if you want to be more hands-off and you want to get a monthly statement every month and just check to make sure everything's stable. So I think if you're in, I'm not quite sure what business you're in, Greg, but if you're in the type of business, you want to find personalities that are a little bit hands-off. If you're in a fund, or if you're looking for private direct investment, you want to find, those hands-on personalities. Ruchi, Vishal, what do you guys think? Do you think that we're going to keep doing direct investments, or you think we're going to go back?
Yeah, I think like direct investments are really growing in terms of the family office space, and specifically like alternative investments. So especially in this region in the Middle East, like people were very fond of real estate and things that you can touch and feel. But these days, because the region saw some good exits in terms of like Souk got bought out by Amazon, and Kareem and Uber had a deal. So like even the patriarchs of these families are now realizing that like tech and like venture capital makes sense. So they are ending up making a lot of direct investments, I think, and that's here to stay. And similarly in the healthcare sector, this region is suddenly seeing a lot of exposure to the healthcare sector, and the relationship with Israel just opened up, and I think that is phenomenal for this region, especially in terms of like getting access to deal flow and venture capital firms. I think a number of Israeli firms that are coming to the Middle East, to Dubai, and even trying to bring their portfolio companies to the region. I think that would completely change how this region has been in terms of like tech and all that. And I think that we can see a bright future.
Yeah, I think so.
We do mostly direct, so I mean, I think it depends also on the quantum of capital that you have. So if you're a single family office or a multi-family office, if you're running with billions of dollars, then you may want to put more into funds and less into direct. Or if the direct investments are larger ticket sizes where it's worth the time and the effort to follow up with the founders. But if it's small angel investing, again, you can't do 100 on your own and then follow up with 100 of them. So yeah, I think there's a time and place. There'll probably be a balance of that investment strategy.
Okay. It looks like Dr. Asar asked a question about the role of robotics in the future of healthcare, and Ruchi did answer that earlier because they're looking at that. They have an investment in this space, but maybe you can let us know, like, what do you think the role is, and do you think it's going to completely replace physical physicians, or what? What are we looking at in the future?
Yeah, I think robotics is here to stay, but one of the things is that like FDA doesn't actually allow autonomous robots, especially in the surgical, in the operation theater. So like there are assistive robots that are around, that have been around for more than 25 years now. But one of the challenges with these robots is that they're so expensive, so they're unable to actually get exposure to various countries. So one of the startups that we invested in is actually trying to solve this problem. So they're creating low-cost robotic surgery solutions, especially for orthopedic applications like knee replacement surgery, hip replacement, and shoulder replacement. And what I've seen, like especially in the pandemic days, like robotic surgery has been adopted widely by doctors because like it requires less manpower to be there in the operation theater, and you can actually save up resources, and the chances of infections are reduced, and you can save up resources that can be used to treat the COVID patients. So I think like, and recently I wrote an article that was featured by Forbes as well on the topic. And so I think that robotic surgery is here to stay, but it's just like it won't actually completely replace the physicians. That's something that won't happen, especially in our generation. But it'll definitely help in terms of like the precision, the accuracy. It can become a daycare surgery instead of like having 5 days of hospital stay and like hospital acquired infections. And also I think like the future is there in terms of robotic surgery, as long as it's available and accessible to the general population. Yeah.
Okay, thank you for that. So I think we've covered all the questions, Rajan. I don't know if anybody else has a question. I think we're a little bit over our time. So
So how do you summarize now?
oh, I have to summarize now. I have homework.
Take investing for better social impact or just impact investing?
So what I'm hearing, the theme from today is that most investors look for some type of a social impact component, meaning either a female or minority team or board, or helping the environment, but we're still technically investing. So we're also looking for financial returns. So we're looking for elements of impact, but not in, complete disregard for financial returns. We're looking for good, solid businesses that might have some women. And I think the quote of the entire conference today was Vishal said he's never lost money investing with women. So I think that's, and there have been themes throughout the day today that women, people of color, non-traditional founders are, a safe bet because, we have the hustle because we have to.
Take it for granted.
Okay.
Any other questions, comments?
If time is up, I guess, right?
Yes. Yes. Thank you so much.
It was a good session shared by Ruchi and Vishal. A lot of practical exposure on the investment side.
Yeah.
So I think your tech investment can make a great impact on the social impact, I guess, in the future. So thank you, all of you. Ruchi,
Thank you.
Samira, I think you're taking out the best from the panelists. Thank you very much.
Great.
So we have another panel exciting done by the next session. I think we can do that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.